Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with Deputy Chris Blin of the States of Guernsey, and we're going to take a look at current matters. Hello, Chris, how are you?
Hello, Tony. How are you? On a beautiful sunny day.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, still alive, so that's the main thing. Let's kick off with the subject of population management, which is obviously a problem that affects Guernsey, particularly, I guess, in the hospitality and the care businesses.
Absolutely.
What's the
Um,
solution?
well, I'm going to start off with a really good bit of news. It goes back to October the 20th, 2023.
Hmm.
Um, there was an amendment by Deputy John Gollop and seconded by myself asking to extend the short-term employment permit called STEP from 3 years up to 4 years.
Right.
And it failed. I think it had about 12 votes. I warned at the time that by April 2026, it will lead to a cliff edge situation for quite a large number of people. Now, what's so important about STEP is that it's the only permit which allows people to come and work, but doesn't allow any dependents, so no family members,
Yeah.
no additional parts. So it's very much a fit for business for certain roles. So by working very closely with Home Affairs, with population management, through immigration, and even support from constitutional affairs, um, literally without the rickets of the amendments, we work very closely for them to also confirm the situation. And it's led to the announcement last week, I believe, that the step has been increased till January 2027. It is interim, but the difference and the impact that has on businesses is brilliant. So I was extremely pleased to be being very much involved with that and extremely pleased that we did that by working collegiately with all the members. And above all, my sort of praise goes to the President of Home Affairs, who actually allowed us to work with the population management, etc. Now, this also means that the review, which is planned by Home Affairs for the end of quarter 4 or quarter 3 this year, now means we have time to truly look at the necessity and the importance of the population management. For example, currently there are businesses who can't get bakers, who can't get fishmongers, and as I very often joke, and candlestick makers. And the reason for that is because they don't fit within the UK system either. So what we have to do is ensure that we have a policy that fits Guernsey, fit for our businesses, because we cannot run businesses. The fishmonger business here includes supplying the hospital, the restaurants, the situation. It's ludicrous to think that we can't get permits for literally less than a handful of individuals who need it. So that's a great, great step, and the review will be a great step.
And I suppose coming back to hospitality and care, a lot of Guernsey people don't want to work in those businesses anymore as employees. So it is vital to have the ability to import labour on a temporary basis, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. And it happens all over the world.
Yeah,
There are always some who join. And hospitality, if you look at the French, France per se, when you have waiters or chefs or, front of house, they look at this as vocational profession.
yeah,
We have always historically looked at it as, look, I'll do this in between, interim. So you still see some great people who have taken the approach. And I've seen many, hotel owners today who started off as KPs and waiters, chefs today who are leading great businesses who started off as kitchen porters. So it is for the few, but a bit like any profession, including nursing, we do produce our own nurses, but not at the volume or the scale required to actually do the work we need for this island.
yeah. And that's important. Now, let's change the subject, Chris, and get on to electricity. The possible France interconnector, how's that going along and how much is it going to cost?
Right. So the price of the interconnector has always been sort of looming around 100 plus up to 130 million, for the cable.
Yeah,
I'll look at it as. But however, as you know, we also that has still has to come to assembly, and that will all have to be reviewed. But that also sort of interjects into the conversation that we've had in the past, Tony, on the wind farm,
yeah,
in the sense that although it's an export-only model, it will generate revenues. Now, I'm not in any way conflating that one leads to the other, but as far as I'm concerned, we're in a world where we need resilience, we need energy security, and we need to ensure we have enough for our islands. So those are the debates that will continue to be had. But there is much more interest now, especially given the energy war, as I call it, the Iran
yeah.
US conflict. It's about energy now, and energy leads to everything, supplies of food, everything we have connected with the raw oil. We are in a very hard and tough place, so we have to look at security, resilience, and long term.
Yeah, and that the security bit being one of the most important bits of it. I suppose from your point of view, if you could get the offshore wind farm underway, somebody else would pay for the cable, would they?
Well, the wind farm, the cable technically could be leading directly from the wind farm in GB waters and
Yeah,
Guernsey waters up to the 12 mile to most probably the UK. That we're still looking at all the options, including of the French coast. Um, but the reality is this, and actually, I can give you some other interesting news related to this, is that, and again, partly influenced by the war and partly influenced by future change of government, the UK still has over 40 gigawatt requirement to fulfill. And this isn't about net zero per se, this is about resilience and energy security. So we have had the news recently that for us to be able to use the transmission for wind farm for the future to be under, let's say, the flag or the auspice of Great Britain, as in the UK
yeah,
transmission, that was actually set for around 2035 primary legislation. Recently, that has been brought forward as early as Q4 2026 or Q1 2027. Now, that hasn't happened yet, but that does give us quite a number of years ahead of the game should that happen. And that is also partly because of the increased demands, energy demands from crypto, from AI. In other words, when Trump shouts out, drill, baby, drill,
yeah.
well, actually, we need everything. We need the oils, we need the wind, renewable energy, we need everything. So this is the time where it's actually puts us in a better picture and also gives us that opportunity to actually strengthen our coffers in a sense, because the benefit will be for Guernsey.
And it's there for the asking if someone will come along and develop it at their expense. Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's a model. It's a model which has been used recently in Saint-Brieuc because they've just launched they've opened up their wind farm. It's usually a consortium of investors, but it's the developers who basically pay, develop, and build. The
yeah,
cost we have is elements of consultants to ensure we're doing the right thing, the extremely strong support of our civil servants who work in the energy space and the constitutional affairs to make sure that we have it right, that we have gone through the correct governance, that we are looking at the right opportunity, that we are looking at the right commercial return. So it takes all the pieces to get that.
and you would see a situation where you'd obviously get a license fee from the provider of the power, and also possibly a bonus rate per unit or something like that.
So in effect, that's it. There's the contract for difference, which assures that the developers and the transmission and the companies that run it, they will get there's a guaranteed sort of minimum rate per
Yeah.
megawatt, going right up to the maximum.
Mm.
So you have that sort of guarantee, but there's also a potential bonus. So on top of the revenue from whether you call it leasing the seabed or a percentage of the revenue created, which, is in the tens of millions. I mean, a lot of stories have been banded around the amount, but either way, it's an extremely handsome and effective figure for us. But if Pillar 2 tax comes in, because the investment by the developers is in excess of the multiple billions, there could be a potential added gain for the monies invested there to have an additional tax on Pillar 2. And of course, don't forget the number of people employed. Given the world is going AI crazy, there will still be fundamental maintenance, engineering opportunities for skilled and unskilled to learn in the area to give the maintenance over several decades of the lifespan of the wind farm.
And that pillar is currently 15%, isn't it?
Yeah, so you can imagine the value on top of the substantial revenues coming from there. But I've always said, and all will say, that this is a mid to long term project, and it's probably the largest project Guernsey has ever done.
Yeah.
So I'm personally very sort of, honoured or proud to have been working with this since the beginning because of the return it's going to give, but not to be conflated with the debates on tax, the debates on GST, the debates on how much more money. In other words, let's focus on this as an opportunity, par excellence, as they say.
Yeah, very much so. You've got a by-election coming up shortly. Any comments on that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, we have this very interesting world at the moment, or community, where some say, let's not waste the money on the by-election, so let's not support it. Some say, let's do it. And then we don't have the full manifesto booklet, say, so we've got limited information. People are kind of vying through, Facebook pages and reels. And I did have a conversation today with one of the media outlets who said they still haven't had the manifesto submitted onto the States of Guernsey website. I think they talked about maybe two.
Mm,
But given the fact that the postal ballot will be kind of opening up soon, there seems to be a lot going on. But people of the community need to know, what they can do and who they can vote for.
yeah, yeah, very much so. Um, One old thorny subject that we get from time to time, the unexploded bombs, which are still there, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a subject very close to my heart. I've been involved with it since the outset. We are now basically awaiting on some information from DSTL, which is the sort of the department of the UK which looks at the ordinance and well, it has to do the review. So we are now at the point where we are awaiting a report. The report has been sent um, uh, by DSTL to the States of Guernsey. I did ask just in the last few days to the President of Home Affairs, what is the situation? The report has not been released, so there's no further information, but I do follow up every few months because it was meant to be imminent for February and then before that, last quarter of last year. So that one we have to await. The one thing I can sort of say is that if the report had an urgency after the first part of the review, then I imagine more action would have been taken. It's maybe not a very sort of academic justification, but one knows that if someone kind of rang the alarm
Yeah,
bell, then they
yeah,
would change.
yeah.
So the key now is to make sure there's consistency, and at some point, we and especially the owners of the land receive a redacted report to give some assurance.
And am I right in saying that one of them was actually taken out and diffused?
Well, there's a lot of I've followed it, as I say, from the beginning, including there were two potentially different types of bomb,
Right.
and the general purpose bomb is a very different beast to the other bomb they believed, which was an armor piercing bomb, which would have dropped down from a height, and then burrowed down into the ground and
Yeah,
then basically been active.
yeah.
Now, this bomb was apparently dropped from a very low height, so it didn't have the chance to kind of to act. And in the past, and the reason I was so concerned, there were some factual evidence of bombs exploding sort of 70, 80 years later, where from the warhead, where the element which actually sort of filters or holds the explosive chamber eroded.
Mm.
So from what I'm understanding, this is part of the question. The most important thing to me, Tony, is actually something is being done, and we just have to keep monitoring. It's no different to just the paper the other day about the responsible officer for HSC,
Yeah.
and we've just announced a motion we've asked to debate with Deputy St. Pierre and myself again, just to get the information.
The IT systems seem to be totally out of control, Chris, in Guernsey, States of Guernsey. Give an example of Mrs. LeBlanc, who received an interim assessment for 2026 the other day, 20 pence for the year, but she could pay it at 5 pence a quarter if she wants to. What's going on? I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
So that's always the huge danger when you have automation looking at the wrong information. So
Yeah.
the idea of spreading payments, yes, but the cost of just the letter would have been surpassing the whole value of the whole part there. Um, what I can say there, and again, this is something close to my heart, is our chief executive for the States of Guernsey, has promised and has spoken to deputies in a series of meetings about not only looking at revenue services, but also looking at the baffling, eye-watering 20 plus million on MyGov. And this isn't necessarily the witch hunt, but this is also isn't saying we won't do it again. I think it's the case of saying, how do we do things properly to avoid this, absurd level of spending when we're also running out and asking people to dig into their pockets for further taxes?
You see, I can remember Guernsey Tax when it was run by Ken Foreman with Richard Green as his deputy. I think in those days, record cards, and they turned those things round in next to no time. And you paid all this money, and they're still God knows how many years behind on it. And no one seems to know actually how much tax is owed to the states, do they?
Well, you hit two subjects there because one, we don't know how much is owed, and therefore we now have a split department in revenue services, for someone trying to improve the system and someone trying to catch up. But two, the other news is the census. So there's been a lot of news recently about the census, and I don't mean the full census, by the way, which hasn't taken place for nearly 2 decades.
Mm, mm.
I'm talking about the updating of data and information. When people are leaving Guernsey, they're not necessarily notifying the government, etc. So this creates another problem where you will still get people receiving information or requests or bills after they've left the island. So until we align all of that, we continue to have a problem. And this is where I really do hope that we are going to come up with results, and I mean results soon, sort of in a few months, to see what other ways we can improve it.
I have a lot of respect for Bowley Smiley, who I've known for a great many years. And if anyone can do it, Bowley will do it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But this leads me on, this IT business, to what's going to happen if you get GST in force? Because if they can't run a simple tax collection exercise, how are they going to deal with this? It just, mind boggles.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with you, Tony. And in the past, we've had conversations on the GST. What's going to be interesting is watch the by-election to see how many people are standing for GST. And I don't believe of the 10 or 11 candidates, there is a single one supporting GST. Maybe some candidates supported it before or something. And
Yeah.
also the flavour and the mood in the Assembly, in the House, seems to be changing there too.
Well,
Also, we don't seem to be clear to what monies we have. That we don't get that information, and that's again, it's not logical to be able
that
to
would be a
run.
start, wouldn't it, Chris? To know exactly what you've got and what you need. But
Absolutely.
I'm firmly of the view you need to increase the allowance substantially. You want to put a 22% band in at some point, and it's all done because it would be paid for in the main by ETI. It seems
And
so
not
obvious to
Yeah,
us.
yeah. Well, the ex-deputy Trott did put that one in. It was one of the options we did. And although there are some aspects of that I'm not sure about because we have to be competitive, for people coming to work because it's the workforce who can choose to go to another island or here or
Yeah.
return back home are now
Mm.
paying a higher rate. Because what you've got to remember, although the headline of 20% to plus a few more pence to 22 percent, we have considerably higher social security. So if you say the UK, the tax is 30 something percent above a certain band, and over in Guernsey is 20 or possibly the 22 you talk about, what we don't take into account is the other social security increase contributions, which take us well over 30, 33,
Yeah, yeah,
34.
yeah, yeah.
So there's that. But I do agree with you that if it were done in that manner, it could be instant without waiting for 2 or 3 years, and therefore would relieve the situation. But as we know, very rarely do you make an increase in tax and then bring it back down again. So we all know the rule.
But the Isle of Man have done it, haven't they? Albeit on a temporary basis. So, you have to ask whether or not Guernsey should be looking at it more seriously.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get GST sorted out and the political will is not there, then surely, you've achieved nothing and you're still going to be carrying the deficit, whatever it is.
Okay. Well, how about this then? A counter argument for this. Um, if you look at other jurisdictions, and I tend to try to,
Mm,
compare, apples for apples.
yeah.
So looking at an apple to a slightly smaller apple, Gibraltar. Gibraltar's economy has a growth around the 6.7 GDP. We're under 2.5, 3% of the push with a 0.4% growth. They have a growth, if we say 2.5, they're at 6.5%.
Yeah.
They're getting on with things and doing things. One of the frustrations I have as a member currently is the fact that when we did our government work plan and our super priorities, and let's remember the word super
Mm,
priority, on there wasn't economic growth. It was the demolition of Leal's Yard. It was ports authorities ensuring the maintenance and structure. What we should be focusing is what we can do for growth. I think Guernsey, the potential of Guernsey is huge for what's able, for what we can do here, etc. But we're not kind of encouraging it. Government should be facilitators. And a bit like, even in a small example, the strategic review on population management, if we get the system right, we could have new types of roles here which are going to create revenue for Guernsey. To
mm.
me, it's always about let's look at net contributors to make Guernsey run. And the public servants, which are essential, are not necessarily the growth leaders, but they're essential. So let's get a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the entrepreneurs that are going to keep the thing going in many respects.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right, let's get on to the A word, something that we don't use very often in Alderney these days, Aurigny. What do you think the BA effects are going to be? They're going to have a daily service up to Heathrow, very competitive fares. That's going to hit Aurigny a bit, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I've already seen some examples of some fares being purchased on the British Airways flights to London for a family. It was a family of four.
Yeah,
And there were incredible savings. Now, obviously, it's the market, so the loss leader type effect. I'm sure they start off with a price there to build it up. They want to make sure they're full. We have not been informed what is the cost of let's call it the subsidy or
yeah,
maybe landing fees and the other aspects there. So we don't
yeah.
know that. But in my opinion, my personal opinion, I think it's great because
Mm,
for me, it's not the opportunity to give us more routes out. To me, it's the opportunity to bring more people in. And the British Airways network includes regional areas to try and bring people in. So the impact on Aurigny, from a kind of, I don't know, an economics point of view, we don't have the full figures of how much it's going to cost us. And of course, it will have an impact. But I'm still of the strong belief, Aurigny gets a lot of flack, like any other transport provider. What I would like to see it do is do what it says on the tin and just operate. Let's say the Gatwick route, the Southampton route, Yes, it's got a separate contract under the PSO for Alderney, but keep it contained. If we knew it was contained and
Yeah.
not doing, I don't know, charters or additionals there, and then let's test the market on the additional ones for the other ones. I believe, in my opinion, we have the space for two. The proper can, which is basically Aurigny doing the community, ensuring it runs. We wouldn't mind then if it has losses because we know its number one priority is looking after the community and protecting our airline, but just keep it contained so that
Mm.
we know exactly what it's doing. And the other side, currently, I do believe that economic development, yes, it's a gamble, but sometimes we have to speculate to accumulate, and we know it's not going to be a bad thing because however you look at it, they've correctly started it in April to go through the season. So we know that is the most popular time. So
Yeah.
again, I think economic development have it right on this one.
It'll be interesting to see how it goes. But I mean, obviously, it's a lot better to go into Heathrow than it is to Gatwick. If
Terminal
you're going to
5,
go on to somewhere else, definitely.
correct. Yeah, or come
Oh,
in from somewhere else.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Aurigny losses in 2025. They haven't published them yet, but I think they're going to be substantial.
yeah. I
Lots
mean,
of wet leasing.
correct. And the wet leasing now, I've seen various figures banded, 100 plus wet leases. And these are not cheap. I mean, we're not been given the exact figure, but we're talking at least £10,000, for a round. And then, of course, there's the dead legs back, etc. So they have been utilized and needed in a lot of cases to get our passengers back home or to fill for tech. There are lots and lots of reasons why, but then some of them end up using it on the charter legs or the other events there. So again, if we did consider having Aurigny fit for purpose and encapsulated with parameters, then actually maybe we could reduce the numbers of those legs. But it's
Yeah,
going to be a tough time, Tony, when this comes back to the assembly. I remember last term, recapitalizing and restructuring, there was a lot of millions again required, and that surely is coming back. And I think it's going to be a very, very hard argument, for the assembly and for Aurigny, who try and they are literally doing all they can, but maybe they need to contain it to in effect what we need to do, and that's
yeah.
impacted the PSO as well.
Yeah. We said at the beginning of this conversation we'd try and get through all the points, but we're losing, we're losing. But we have got enough time to talk about the Bailiwick Commission inquiry. How do you see that? I mean, what's it going to end up with potentially, and who's going to gain, if anybody, apart from the various people that are involved in it?
Okay, well, look, I think it's beautifully ironic, given that you live on Albany. Um, During the debate, if you remember last term about the Aurigny runway and the
Yeah,
classifications of airport, etc., and the argument in the assembly all the time is, was, well, okay, but you have an obligation. You have the 1948 agreement, and this went on and on and on. Now, we are agreeing that we now have to repair Alderney runway,
yeah.
which I think is the correct order to do it, but we haven't finished on the 1948 agreement, which is also the correct way to do it. So the way I perceive the Bailiwick Commission is part of that covering is the 1948 agreement.
Mm,
And I did think at the beginning how odd to see the assembly of different political and very astute individuals, none of them connected with Guernsey or Alderney or the Channel Islands. But actually, that is correct. If you want to do something independently, you have to look at it. So I think this is being done in the right order. And I do believe that it's the conversation we've been saying for a long time. What are we going to do about the 1948 agreement?
mm. Okay. Of course, we have a situation with the 1948 agreement whereby the British government must have been involved at the start to implement it. Should they not be involved in this inquiry as
Well,
one of
most of
the
the
original parties?
Yeah. So here you're referring almost to the government, but actually members of that assembly are actually experienced and in some cases involved with the UK government. In other
Yeah.
words, that's why I think it's a good choice.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, we need to look after ourselves. We are the bailiwick, we are a family, and this will give an independent view. I am really looking forward to see how this is, how the stakeholder engagements go on, how the conversations go on, and eventually what will be the recommendations.
Yeah.
Um, I'll give you an example. As chair of the Offshore Wind Delivery Board, we are also working with the Alderney government, and I think that's great. So we have opportunities to see how we can assist and also how they can assist themselves to actually look for the opportunities for growth, which will impact on the relationship.
So you're pretty hopeful that things in that department should sort themselves out.
Well, we have to start somewhere, and that review, the Bailiwick Commission, to me, is an extension of the final debate, where we just keep on, repeating the same thing. What about the 1948 agreement? Well, this forms part.
So would you like to see a 2027 agreement which effectively deals with the current situation rather than what happened, 50 years ago? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
70 years ago,
yeah,
80 years
yeah,
ago, a
that's
long
right.
time ago.
No, but absolutely. So, but as I say, if it had been done the other way around, I would have been very, very upset.
Yeah.
I.e., we can't sort of say, let's have the Bailiwick Commission report and do everything there, and then decide on Alderney Airport. No, we have our responsibilities.
Mm.
It's the Bailiwick, it's the community. So we have to do what's right now, but we also have to have that final discussion to identify what we need to do after. So yes,
Right.
move 2027.
Okay, Chris, I think we're virtually there. Apart from, well, we've talked in general terms about Iran and the war and everything else, and of course everyone's suffering as a result of the increased cost of fuel. Do you hope that the markets will adjust fairly shortly, or what are your views there?
Well, quite frankly, I'm just in despair watching how the United States, or rather, President Trump is behaving. The recent accolade on, well, it wasn't an accolade, it was a torrent of abuse on X. Where the president was swearing to Iran. But this is an energy war. This is unlike anything else, and the transactional aspect of the markets going up and down. Um, we are not in a good place. Congress did not approve this. You can see a lot of the European nations and the British counterparts. They are, we need to work almost Europe, the UK, and everyone else to try to avert the damages being set by this war. We are in a really tough energy war, and the impact on everything at the most sensitive time when the last thing we should do is be put in a
Like
situation.
like all of these things, it's very easy to start a war, not so easy to stop a war, and nobody ever seems to take on board the consequences.
Yeah, and that has always been the case.
Yeah.
We know. Meanwhile, we forget about Ukraine and Russia. But can you imagine one day the reparations involved in any of these conflicts?
Mm.
And this is what started here. The damage is basically in some cases irreparable, and the cost is beyond any economy.
It's dreadful, isn't it? But there we are. Bit of a glum note to finish on, Mr. Blin, but possibly we can have a happier one later on in the year.
Yeah, well, let's not forget the weather is great. The
Yep.
season is busy. We have the ferries, we have the new aviation, we have the permits extended to allow businesses to be able to look after. So I believe it's going to be a very positive one.
Well done, Chris. I'm pleased to hear that, and I go along with you wholeheartedly.
That's
Good
good.
to see you. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Bye.